started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the screening of Status Pending. For those who may not know me, my name is Marissa Montes, and I'm the director for the Loyola Immigrant Justice Clinic, or as we call it, the LIJC. LIJC has a dual-pronged mission to advance the rights of the immigrant population in East Los Angeles through direct services, education, and community empowerment, while teaching law students effective immigrant rights lawyering skills in a real-world setting. The film touches on a lot of these themes we discuss with our students, and we look forward to a lively discussion after the film. Before we get started, I'd like to welcome our MC for the evening, Maria Villa. Maria serves on the board for the LIJC and is an important member of my own support system. Maria graduated from Loyola Law School and has consistently supported the school and our students, including by endowing the first ever scholarship for Latina law students in 1998. She's a principal of the law firm of Lathrop and Villa, which she co-founded in 1992. She has an active state and federal appellate practice and has practice in the areas of employment and business litigation and plaintiff's class action litigation. Among many other firsts, Maria was the first Hispanic attorney to be elected to the State Bar Board of Governors in 1999 and served as vice president and treasurer. She is a founder and member of the Latina Lawyers Bar Association, a member and former president of the Mexican American Bar Association of Los Angeles County, and a lifetime member and former deputy regional president of the Hispanic National Bar Association. Lastly, just some housekeeping rules. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. And welcome, Maria. The floor is yours.
Gracias, Marisa. We're so glad that you've joined us tonight for the screening of Status Pending. This film, directed by Priscila Gonzalez Saenz, portrays the 5 members of an informal support group comprised of Mexican-American solo firm immigration attorneys, striving to help their clients obtain safety and status in the United States as they contend with the constant attacks on immigrants and immigration law under the Trump administration. We thank Priscilla and all of the film's producers for the opportunity to share this film with you. After the film, which runs 26 minutes, Priscilla and the attorneys from the film will join us for a discussion with Marisa and other faculty and students from the LIJC, and a question and answer from you, our audience. We look forward to the conversation. Without further ado, we invite you to watch with us now. This is Status Pending. This film impacted me in so many different ways, and it did again today, even though it's my 3rd time viewing it. I hope you were inspired as well, and I'm so happy that the LIJC and the Loyola community decided to present the screening for you all. The producers have a survey that we're putting into the chat, and we'll also send to you via email later, that we hope you'll complete to help them understand the impact of their film. So many of the themes of the film are issues that our Loyola Immigrant Justice Clinic addresses with our students and its volunteers and alumni trainings. LIJC shares the mission of the film and the passion of the attorneys featured here to inspire and support more attorneys to take on the mantle of immigration practice and immigration reform. As you listen to today's discussion, I hope you'll be moved to join me in supporting the clinic to make these opportunities available to even more students. You'll find a link for a donation page in the chat. We invite the audience to type your questions in the Q&A field, and hopefully Alma and Araceli can stay on for a few. So while we get some questions in, I want to start off with the first question. The film portrays the difficulty of practicing law in a field where the law is so harmful to your clients. For Marisa or Yanira, how do you prepare and support your students to handle this aspect of immigration law practice? And for the film participants, how has your law school training prepared you for this? Or what would you have wished to have learned there? And for the students, what has been helpful in your training? So maybe we can start with Marisa.
I'm happy to chime in. This is something that we constantly talk about in the clinic, is the need for reflection. Reflection in the sense of, for both ways. One, identifying issues regarding the way that we communicate with our clients, but also in the sense of identifying, possible issues regarding over-identification with clients and how to use the skills of trauma-informed lawyering as a way to not only support your client in the situations that they're facing, given the fact that many of our clients are in fact survivors of trauma of some sort, but also as a way of making sure that they engage in self-care. So reflection, I would say, would be a key component of, the practice that we do in the clinic. And I know that Danny and Heidi can touch upon this. And the reason that we do this so much in the clinic is that in hopes it becomes, something that they rely on after they graduate and are in fact practicing law.
Thank you. I'm going to go a little out of order here because we have one question for Alma, and I know she has to leave. The question is, how devastating was it discovering that your client was not safe to go to his immigration appointment? Has that changed under the new administration? And is there a specific law that we can lobby for change?
Yes, I mean, the client that was actually picked up and arrested and eventually deported at that scheduled appointment was a client who had a prior order of removal, and we had scheduled check-ins where they were sort of prolonging his removal because he did have a petition pending through his wife. At this particular, I think that we were sort of prepared, I guess is the right word, for the possibility that he could be detained at any given check-in, because these were check-ins. But the fact that he had the petition pending, we were actively working on the case, had sort of caused us to get more time. This particular time, I can't even tell you. It probably was just a matter of the fact that we were in the midst of the Trump administration that caused the officer to basically, and it was the same officer that we've been seeing throughout his check-ins, to do an about face and say, this is the time that we're going to take him in and not give you any more time to work on this case. I don't currently have, and maybe the other lawyers can speak to this, I don't currently have clients that I'm taking in on orders of supervision and seeing any changes under the Biden administration. So given the fact that I'm sort of outside the realm of orders of supervision right now, maybe the other lawyers can speak into the differences that they've seen.
So I'll say for me, after Alma's client got picked up, I mean, I think that I definitely felt very scared because I did have a pretty good number of clients in a similar situation where they had a prior removal and were going in for order of supervision. And, we either had like a U visa pending or, a TPS application pending, but nothing that really gave them any type of stay of removal, So, I to this day, I mean, I don't know why Alma's client, for whatever reason, got picked up that day. And I have clients who didn't and haven't and are still here, and, some of my clients, they might not be on paper, the person that someone might say, hey, this person deserves it over the other, because some of my clients, they do have, some criminal history. I'm optimistic, that under this administration, there will be fewer detentions, I think time will tell.
Thank you. Is there any law that you know of that we could lobby for change, or anything in that regard that you know of to the attorneys?
So I'd say no, because again, these people that, like Alma said, they're people who've already essentially been ordered removed, and so you're kind of they're basically at the mercy of the officer. So, there essentially needs to be a change in policy for that to change.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back then to the trauma question about practicing in a harmful area harmful to one's client. For the film participants, regarding your law school training, do you think you were prepared for this, or what have you learned along the way?
I was absolutely unprepared for this. When Marissa spoke about her class, I thought to myself that that would have been an amazing class to take, and that it would have at least given me a glimpse into what I was in for. I think as a young attorney, I had no boundaries with my clients, and I took it all on, and it was devastating. It wasn't good for my health, frankly. And it's just a skill set that you're going to develop. But it is very difficult, because I think for those of us that have chosen immigration law as our field, we're not doing it for, we're not doing it for this huge salary that we're going to earn. We're doing it because we have a personal connection, because we come from immigrant families, because we care about these communities. So it's something that the group and I talk about often, is that it's a fine line. You can't care so much that it paralyzes you and you're not able to make decisions because you're so scared for your clients. But you have to care in order to still be good. So it's this really, really fine line. And especially during the beginning of the Trump administration, for the first time in my career, I felt really scared. I almost felt paralyzed, because we were advising in the dark, and every week it was like, I remember one day I had a full day of consultations in Buellton, and something came out about public charge via tweet. And it was so hard for me to be present for my clients for the rest of those consultations, because I felt like almost said in the film, I felt like a rookie. I didn't know what was happening. So we need more clinics, is what I'm saying. Marissa, you need to teach other people to teach your class, because that needs to be everywhere.
Elizabeth, do you want to respond to that question? Or Araceli, see you're still on.
Are you there, Araceli? Well, I would say, I think I completely agree with Gladdys, and I think that even as attorneys, we could benefit from Marissa's class, and I think it's something that we don't always do, is talk about how the work that we do, really impacts us as people on a very personal level. I think that those of us, the attorneys in the film, we are really good friends, and I think that we're lucky that we do have each other, and we're able to, check in. And sometimes it's just literally like a mental health text, how are you doing? Hey, checking in, and even though, the Trump administration, as we could say, it's over. I mean, there's still a lot that needs to be cleaned up. So, we're still dealing with it. I think that we are beginning to see, some positive changes, but we've got a long ways to go, and it's hard because every week there's phone calls about, is there immigration reform, or am I going to qualify under the new Biden plan? And we're like, I think before we even get to that, we got to clean up the mess that was left behind, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would also add that I think that we're traumatized, Eli, because they're not even positive changes. It's just a return to the normal bad, right? We have not seen any, what have we seen that's new and good? Nothing. It's just a return to the old bad. So I think—
And you're right. I almost, until you saying it now, I honestly hadn't even realized it. It's I'm happy to go back to the way things used
to normal, right? And so I think that we have to be very careful as immigration advocates to really hold this administration accountable to promises that it made to the immigrant community. No, you're not just going to throw us back to where we were and expect us to be happy. We need more.
Very good point. Anita, did you want to address that from the attorney perspective, that question?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Oh, about basically trauma-informed lawyering and how.
Well, I mean, something that Marissa mentioned, self-care is something that I think is really important. I had a really awesome mentor when I was in law school, who's now an adjunct, Gina Amato. She's an adjunct in the clinic. And I really try to pass that along, not just as a message, you know, make sure you do something of that's considered self-care for you, but also in teaching, you know, case management strategies that are effective, discussing caseload, because that's part of the self-care and the mental health. If you know, you're overworked as an attorney, then you're gonna feel like you're not having the time to do the things that are gonna kind of refuel you. So yeah, I try to teach practical tools that will enable our future attorneys to actually implement those self-care tactics that they want to, like whether it's exercise or spending time with family, spending time with friends, yeah, so that's part of the way that I pass that along.
So now let's hear from the students. Heidi, do you want to go first?
Sure. So one of the first things I learned as an intern and then as a clinical student is the impacts of vicarious trauma, and how, because we are so connected to our clients and their stories, and sometimes we see ourselves in their stories, we want to go above and beyond all the time. I feel like every attorney I've encountered within immigration we have that in common, which is very admirable. But it's true, it can definitely take a toll, especially as time goes on. So one of the first things that Marissa taught us is how to be able to place that boundary, but like healthy boundaries. And the way I've been able to try to improve that for me is to kind of reflect and think, if I'm not at my best, then I'm not going to be able to serve my client at my best. And so I try to have a conversation with like any client early on, and kind of let them know that we are here for them and we are going to do everything we can to help them out. But at the same time, in that conversation, we let them know when they're going to hear from us, if they email us, if they contact us, because on the flip side, I know that because of my parents' background, when they were going through their immigration process, they're scared, and they want to feel as if their attorney is in contact with them, right? And so I know what it's like to be on their side, and so as a client, and so letting them know beforehand, what they're going to expect and what the process is and when they're going to hear from us and all of that stuff, I think that goes a long way. And also, just personally, I also do a lot of reflection, like what Marissa mentioned earlier, a lot of reflection after a client meeting, because I feel like it's very important to kind of digest everything that did happen, and maybe also talk it out. Marissa always lets us know, like, if you need anything, please let me know, even if it's just to talk about how that conversation with your client made you feel. The client that I helped out this year, she's a 12-year-old girl applying for SIGIS, and she went through horrible trauma in her home country with her parents. And in one of the meetings, she cried, and in turn, that made me feel like, it makes you feel vulnerable, and it makes me feel like even harder to talk to her for the next meeting. But at the same time, I get reminded that this is a process, and this is why we need more immigration advocates that do care, But at the same time, we kind of just need to remember that taking care of ourselves means taking care of them too, so we can advocate for them better.
Thank you. Danny, what tactics have you learned to use in dealing with clients in difficult situations?
Well, I want to echo a lot of what Heidi said about just recognizing boundaries with clients. For one of my clients, she definitely communicated with my partner better, and there were days where I couldn't make the meetings, and they got so much more work done. And I just recognized that maybe as like a male, or just recognizing like who I was affected the progress of the case. So I was like making sure that we just made them as comfortable as possible. I also try to like empower my clients. They definitely feel helpless and like we're the only person they can turn to in these situations, and they have questions about things. But some like overstep the boundary more often. So it's like empowering them to make their own decisions, or being able to like just get simple things that they can get for themselves, and like they'll the next time that this arises, they feel more empowered to just take it on themselves.
Thank you. Continuing on with the self-care and wellness, Marisa, do you have any advice for the attorneys who have experienced burnout because of this difficult practice?
Yeah, well, as I tell all my students, I need to learn to practice what I preach myself, right? I was like, do as I say, not as I do, right? Because I know that I'm definitely not perfect. And I think Heidi and Danny recognize this, but I do want to kind of back over something that we see in the movie, and that I wanted to bring up initially, is like the importance of creating space and, creating a community, right? I think part of like our culture, especially as lawyers, capitalism, American culture, it's like all about the grind, right? Like who can work the hardest hours, who can take on the most clients, who can win most cases. And that grind is what eventually leads us to burnout and not be able to advocate for our clients, right? And that's why I really admire the fact, that the movie talks about this need of building community with one another, right? And doing this work and creating a space where you can discuss these issues, which I feel that as attorneys we overlook, because it's not part of our culture, and relying on one another to kind of, talk through these situations out. And, going back to like the importance of a pipeline, right? So, I've had you, Maria, and then Liz and Gladdys, and helping start the clinic. And, all three of you have been a source of support for me. Now I'm happy to pass this on to my students, right? And, and now Heidi and Danny, now that they're both 3Ls, will be graduating, creating that space for their classmates and generations to come, right? And like particularly Heidi, who will be teaching law students, right, herself. So yes, like creating this sense of community, I think, is really what helps with burnout. And I think too, something as like something that I talk to students about often, and that I think is part of it is, as part of, we do this work because we're connected to it, but our ancestors, our communities, our parents sacrificed so much to get here. And for us to be in these spaces that are usually not available to us as first generation, as people of color, part of the act of rebellion is engaging in self-care and having fun, live hard, work hard, play hard, right? So I think that's a concept that I think is very important to adopt, right? And that by actually enjoying life, we are not only healing ourselves, we're healing our communities, and we're healing those that came before us.
Thank you. I want to touch on a question here that we got in the chat. We touched a little bit on that about the new administration. Do you anticipate or foresee a big immigration policy shift like amnesty? So for the attorneys. Elizabeth, Gladdys.
I don't know. I mean, like I said, I may be naive, but I am remaining, very optimistic. I think it's going to come down to a question of how soon and how we see it, I don't think it's going to be anything like we've seen in the past. I don't think that we've ever had the numbers that we have now. And we also know, there's obviously so much opposition. It seems to me that it may be something that we see piecemeal. And there has been a lot of talk, about whether it will be, like DACA recipients or people in TPS status who kind of might have like, first dibs at something. I understand, where that's coming from. I don't agree with it, but I understand, where the Democrats may feel that that's the approach they have to take in order to, kind of, little by little, start getting people some more permanent status. So, I mean, that's my opinion right now, I'd like to see something bigger and a more broader sweeping immigration reform, but I don't know. I mean, it's sad, but we don't even have all Democrats on board. So
that's my sense as well. I think that there's going to be I wish that Democrats were bold and ruthless. The reality is that they're not. I think that they are going to use DACA as a test case. And if we can't get residency for DACA, I won't be optimistic after that, because this is the easiest, most palatable group to help. But like Eli, I am going to believe and be hopeful and be optimistic and simultaneously push and pressure until I can't anymore.
Thank you. Marisa, anything to add on the policy perspective?
I agree. Something that we've discussed in class is, there's so much pressure on the Biden administration. Not that I'm defending Biden, right? Because I do think that we have to remain critical, and now it's all about accountability, right? And that goes with all of our elected officials. But it's really up to the Congress, right? At the end of the day, Biden can say like, these are my suggestions, but it's really Congress that has the duty to act. And like Gladdys was saying, I think we saw the last administration be completely ruthless, and people of his party be completely ruthless. I don't think that, Democrats should necessarily, be tamed, But I agree that, what we'll see is piecemeal legislation. Legislation has already been introduced by the House that specifically for DACA recipients, TPS holders, and I believe farm workers. So we'll see what happens, right? But I do anticipate that it's going to be piecemeal. I don't anticipate that there'll be a big push for immigration reform.
Has anyone reached out to the clinic on that, on working on any reforms?
We haven't just yet. We have still been focusing more on a local level, just because it was piggybacking with a lot of work that we've previously done in the clinic. Like right now, we're doing legislative advocacy at a state level, which Heidi did, advocating for the expansion of benefits for certain kinds of immigrants, specifically victims of crime and trafficking, unaccompanied children, in light of COVID. And so we are hoping, though, like once things start picking up more, that we will hopefully be engaged on a federal level, because we haven't been able to the last 4 years, right? Because we couldn't actually put any type of reliance on the Trump administration to do anything that was necessarily immigrant friendly. So I'm hoping that, we'll have the opportunity to do so maybe next year.
Thank you. We're getting close to our ending time, but I do want to take one more question from the chat. And this one is for Priscilla. How did you decide how much of each client's story you needed to tell in order to craft this profile of the attorneys?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. I mean, it was very challenging to try and find that balance between giving enough of a glimpse of a specific case or a client's story, while creating a film that's sort of a tapestry of a group, sort of a group snapshot. So it was, the whole editing process took a very long time in making films. I mean, there's several cuts. I worked with a team, of course, to put the final film together. But I worked really closely with my editor, Sarah Garahan. And so we had these conversations about sort of what order to put scenes, how do they work together. So it was really a lot of trial and error, truthfully, on the storytelling side of it. And what we were really looking for was how do we choose stories that sort of really work together just to present again, a portrait of these different types of experiences, but also the different ways in which the lawyers are experiencing that for themselves, and kind of like what cases tell us a bit about the lawyer as well as their client. So there's a lot of, unfortunately, a lot that had to be left out in order to make this cohesive piece. Yeah, we just, we're really trying to create a snapshot. I mean, it's just a tiny portrait. There's so much more that they do, as you all know.
Thank you. And one last question is, what advice do you have for law students who are considering a career in immigration law?
I feel like they should hear from the law students currently pursuing a career in immigration law. So Danny and Heidi, I'm putting you guys on the spot.
So I think for the number one thing is networking. My very first, when I tried to pursue my very first job before law school in immigration, I had no experience. And every firm, everywhere required either 2 years experience, 5 years experience. But thankfully, there was a pre-law society in my undergrad at Cal State LA. And I went to an attorney presentation. And actually the attorney is one that was previously mentioned. It was at Enrique Arevalo. I got his business card and just emailed him my resume. And I was like, I'm looking for a job. I want to do immigration law. And that kind of got my foot in the door. And I was really happy I did that because that's how I started, gaining all these connections and understanding more about the immigration process in general, which just kept strengthening over time. So please, I'll also put my email in the chat, but something that has helped me a lot was reaching out to people. It's at least for a lot of us and I've experienced this a lot. It's never a bother. I'm always happy to share how I got here. And a lot of it is thanks to my mentors, thanks to the community that has been mentioned as well. It's a very supportive community. And that would be my number one advice. And also, if there aren't any jobs available or internships available, seek them out. Contact people directly that you have met previously and say, I'm interested, can I volunteer? Jobs come out because of that, or internship opportunities. We remember that, and that would be my advice.
Yeah, a lot of the same that Heidi said. I actually crashed the MABA meeting, and that's how I met Marissa for the first time. And yeah, just speaking with people and reaching out to them, and because a lot of people want to help, and if you just put yourself out there, they know. Also, getting a mentor early on, at least at Loyola, they have tons of mentor program. Every student association, including La Raza, and the school has a mentorship program. So I just signed up for all of them, and then some didn't pan out well, but my mentors really they helped me out. They told me what books to buy. They gave me copies of their own books. They told me to watch out for certain professors, and just they answer all the dumb questions you have about law school that nobody ever tells you about.
Thank you, Danny. Well, it's past our time to end. So as we come to a close, I want to thank the panelists for joining us today. You really have given us much to think about. It's still a frustrating process, even though we have a change in administration, but I do hold out a lot of hope for positive change in immigration law. Priscilla, we are so grateful to you for telling the story of this important and emotionally challenging, draining work that first-generation immigrant law practitioners have to do on a day-to-day basis as they continue to make our country stronger by bringing immigrants into the fabric of our society. So please help the next generation of the LIJC attorneys to continue to do their crucial work of educating, training, supporting, and helping out immigration advocates. There's a donation link available in the chat. And also tonight's program will be available on the LIJC site, not the screening of the film, unfortunately, but the panel presentation will be available. And you could also make a donation from that page. And finally, don't forget to complete the survey that's available now in the chat, and later will be coming into your email boxes, where you'll be able to share your thoughts on the impact that status pending has made on you. Thank you all again for joining us, and please continue to pray for our immigrants. Thank you. Good night.